Yeah, I can hear. Good to go. Great. I'm seeing a lot of people can hear. Excellent. Very good. All right. So I just wanted to cover up a few housekeeping things. Like we mentioned, you can use the question. Marshall's going to be starting his presentation in just a moment, and he's got just a huge amount of great information. I'm sure that when a lot of you folks saw the topic of this, it's interesting to you. Who wouldn't be interested in increasing their paycheck? I know I would be. And Marshall's got some great tips that he's going to be sharing with you. Throughout the presentation, you may have some questions about what he's talking about. You can go ahead and submit those questions. At the end of the presentation, we're going to be going over the questions. I'll be reading them to Marshall, and he'll be able to answer some of them. So that'll be a good way for you to get your question in, and then we can answer that. But just a little bit about ministry design training to give you a history of where that started. Uh, I met Marshall a few years back, and I've always been amazed at the depth of knowledge that he's had. He's been very instrumental in our church in helping our leadership team. We've learned quite a bit from him. And a couple of years back, when Marshall started consulting full time, one of the things I was talking with him about is you may have heard of Pareto's principle. It's the 80-20 rule, meaning 80% of your benefit comes from 20% of your work. Well, one of the things that we were talking about is that there is a lot of repetition in his individual counseling sessions. Now, Marshall's done a lot of counseling with pre-construction management for churches, and also a lot of pastoral counseling and the kind of the nuts and bolts of the ministry behind the scenes, so to speak. And what he was telling me was that, yes, both in his pre-construction counseling and in the ministerial counseling, there was a lot of repetition. And this was a problem only because Marshall had confided to me that he has a burden to reach 25,000 churches and to help 25,000 churches to be able to better minister to their communities. So you can imagine doing one-on-one counseling, that's going to be a really tough task. So what we talked about is that using some of the technology available today, we're able to put together programs and training that are going to be able to reach more and more people and being able to leverage the digital technology. So that's where ministry design training came about. Marshall has done some webinars in the past, and I think we're on track to start doing more and more, and that's why this is one of our inaugurations on a new software package that we're using that we're hoping is going to be very beneficial, that we're going to be able to reach a lot of folks, get a lot of information out there. So that's my involvement with Marshall and his training. I've been able and privileged to help him get his website up and going. I am by no means a content expert, but I have learned quite a bit from Marshall over the period of time that we've worked together on this. So without any further introduction, I'm going to hand over the presentation to Marshall, and he's going to go over his content about the pastor and the paycheck. So Marshall, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Marty. Two things here, housekeeping things. First off, as we go through this list, our purpose is to help you as a pastor to maximize the structure of your pay package so that you can steward it correctly. And so there probably will be some things that you may learn that you've not heard before or not looked into deep enough in order to find the tax benefits and some of the things that you can do to really reserve the money for yourself and to conceal it. I don't mean that in a negative or bad or illegal way, but to package it correctly so that it can provide better for your family and help you further the cause of Christ. And when you don't structure your pay package correctly, think of it as a fireplace. I have a fireplace in my home. We have wood that we burn. We also have starter logs and different things we do. Well, when you don't structure your pay package correctly, think of it as just taking the wallet out of your pocket, pulling the cash out of your pocket, and throwing it in the fire and heating your house with your dollar bills. And so as we go through this, that was the first thing. I want you to understand what we're trying to do and how we're trying to help you in the next few moments as we go through these things. Really is just the tip of the iceberg. And then there's more that we provide through our training on ministrydesigntraining.com. The second thing is I'm not speaking to you as a tax attorney or as a CPA. I'm neither one of those. I've pastored for the majority of my adult life and then been a ministry coach. And so in doing so, we hope that this will be very helpful to you as we go through these different things that deal with the pastor and his paycheck. So what are the major components of a pastor's pay package? What are the major components? There are 8 that we're going to deal with. Your salary, what you take home and pay. They hand you a check every week or every 2 weeks, every month, however you have it set up with your pay periods. Housing allowance. There are regulations, tax law, that allows you to deduct from federal income tax your housing allowance. There are benefits, and we'll get to those in a moment. The different insurances and some other things that you can do to help you structure your pay so you're not paying taxes on dollars that you receive that you don't need to be paying federal income tax on. Retirement package, your business expense. And something you may not have thought much about is the work for hire laws. And then any future staff. So I would really encourage you to think beyond your own pay package to your existing staff and then any future staff, that you can provide a pathway, a process that makes it not so uncomfortable for yourself and everyone else. And so we'll talk about that in just a moment. And then severance packages. And you may find often that the people in your church, if they're not in a position where they're employing others, that they may question why you would have a severance package. And so we'll look at that as a part of your pay package as well. Well, let's deal first off is how do you determine as a church the baseline for your pay package? And there are 3 optional baselines that I'm going to present here just quickly in introduction to help you determine where you're going to start, who you're going to base it on. One is that sometimes churches base the pastor's pay and the staff's pay on the income and pay packages of the people in their church, of their congregation. They may take the median, the average, and or some other way to figure out where do we balance that, where do we start, so we know how to take care of our staff. Other churches have used the community's income and pay package. They've looked at demographic studies and have decided to pay the pastor the average or median of what the community is earning, and they may even break it down into the industry professionals that somewhat match what rules and roles the pastor is doing. The third one is to use a compensation study of the church industry, meaning senior or lead pastor, executive, assistant, associate pastors, children's pastors, all the way through as you look at your staff as to how to set the baseline for their pay package. You'll understand later why I use the term baseline. So how do you determine your salary baseline? And some salary considerations for you as you navigate your way through this each year. And perhaps you'll follow my advice and set up a process for this because it comes around every year. How are you going to deal with it? Well, here's a consideration. Are you going to set the baseline of pay by the community living standards? And by that, you may take and even narrow that down to the target group, and you're trying to find a base of where do you start with determining, do we pay them $1 or $2 or $3 or $4? So one consideration is to look at the living standards of the community, and the logic behind that is that you're trying to reach that community. You don't want to live over that community or under it, and because it can hinder you in one way or another. You can look at the people, narrow that community down to the people groups that you're targeting to reach with the gospel, and setting and looking at their living standards and setting the pastor's pay so that he is right in with the group that he's trying to reach, and it can assist them in the way that you minister to that people group. For instance, you have to settle, are both spouses, are they going to work outside the home, or are you going to require that the pastor's spouse not work outside the home? Do they own or rent their own homes? And so when you're looking at setting the base pay, there are some places in the United States for the pastor to be paid enough to buy a home in the neighborhood where he ministers. You have to take into account the living standards of the community and what you might have to pay in order to help the pastor afford his own home. Are they going to live in an apartment, a condominium, a townhouse? Are they going to own their own home? Are they going to live in a mobile home? All of these things are a part of, and so as you look at the living standards of the community and target groups that you wish to reach or that you're reaching and ministering to, that you consider all of this as a part of it. This is one way to do it. Then, why should you reduce your taxable dollars? Why would you do that? Well, let me just put some numbers on it in front of you. You take one taxable dollar, it's taxable income. If you have not opted out of self-employment, you're obligated to quarterly file your estimated tax payments, and it's 15.3%. And so as you look at that amount, and added to that is your federal income tax. Now, I've just put 15% here. Probably most of us are in the 15% range. Some might be in the 10% or up to the 25% because it's based on your taxable income, which you're reporting. But you take those two numbers, and then if you're like me, where I live in South Carolina, we've got state income tax, and you add those together, and I can't know what every state does, but I just put here for illustration purposes 5 to 10% for the state income. And as you begin to look at that, it doesn't take long for you to understand that's 30.3 to 40.3% of that $1, which on a taxable dollar is 30.3 cents to 40.3 cents per dollar. That if you're paying taxes on it, this is the potential. So as you structure and want to maximize your pay package to steward that money, you're looking for ways to put more money in your pocket to care for your family so that you can better minister to your family and your church and community. That leaves you with only 60 cents to 70 cents for every taxable dollar you earn if you're just accounting for those three numbers. And so here's an example. If you're able to reduce your salary, and this is a huge amount, but I just put $20,000, just the two here, self-employment and federal income tax, that's $6,000 of savings. If you have to pay state income tax, as I do, you may be saving up to $8,000. When you figure that out, that's over $100 up to $155 weekly in extra money that you can use if you have learned how to maximize your tax package, how you structure your pay package. So let's step into the second thing. Your salary, you're probably trying to reduce your take-home, what's taxable, and the largest benefit that has been given to pastors to help them with their income is the housing allowance, and you want to take advantage of that. And so whether you own, rent, or you live in a church-provided house, the allowance applies to each of these. And let me just stop for a moment to plug something here. If you or your staff are living in a church-provided house, consider asking the church to provide an equity allowance to compensate that pastor for living in a church-provided house. Because he doesn't own his own home, he's not earning equity as he pays for his home over a period of years. And this is a way for for pastors to, when they leave a church or retire from a church, in some way they're finished pastoring, that equity is given to them to compensate them for living in the church house. The church perhaps has saved a lot of money by not paying the pastor as much as though he were buying his own home. And so which is just a thought, certainly one that I appreciate having pastored all these years. So housing allowance, if you haven't read the regulations, it can include the following things. This is not exhaustive, but I'll summarize it in a moment. Your mortgage or rent payment, your home insurance, your property taxes, maintenance, any improvements you make to your home, utilities. Basically, it includes any cost that is associated with maintaining your home. And that's whether you own or rent or live in church-provided housing. That these laws and these benefits apply to you in some way. So why utilize your housing allowance? Well, back to the dollar bill taxable income, just this example. You don't have to pay federal income tax on housing allowance. So if you've not done this, let's take the dollar bill. Let's say that you go to your church and you talk to them about this benefit that the law provides for you, and you can utilize this to remove taxable income out of your pay package. Every dollar that they've designated as housing allowance, and the way the law works, and I'm just generalizing this because it can get confusing. If they designate $1 for housing allowance for the year and you spend 75 cents of the dollar, you're going to have to pay federal income tax on 25 cents of that dollar that you did not have a receipt showing that you substantiated that this is the money that you spent on housing. If they designate $1 and you spend $1.25 on housing, now you're going to have to pay taxes on the 25 cents over the dollar. And so there's some formulas that you can use to go through to take and work out and add everything up to estimate what your housing is going to be, your housing allowance should be for the coming year. And so when you do your taxes, you're not either wishing you had allotted more to housing or you're having to pay federal income tax on that, which you did not account for. And so as we go through this, you're taking 15% federal income tax. So why should you utilize your housing allowance? Because you want to avoid paying taxes where you're not required to pay taxes. And then if you have state income tax, you've got that involved. And so we're looking at 15 to 20% if you have state income tax added to that. And so on a taxable dollar, that's 15 to 25 cents. That leaves you with 75 to 85 cents of every taxable dollar you earn. So if you're able to, let's say that your housing allowance for the year was $20,000, 15% of that's $3,000. 25% of that is $5,000. And so that's $57 to $96 a week in extra take-home pay just by utilizing your housing allowance and doing it correctly. And so as you begin to think through this, just scratch this down as you're taking notes. If your pay package is $50,000, and through better utilizing the tax avenues or things that you can use here, if you save 1% of $50,000, that's $500. 2% is $1,000. 3% is $1,500. If you were able to utilize it and come up with a way to cut your taxes by 10%, that's 10% of $50,000, $5,000. When you break that down by the month, you're looking at what, $500 a month to save $6,000 in taxes. And so as we go through this, you should use this as a springboard, this video training as a springboard to dig deeper into how you can better steward that which is entrusted to you by the Lord. Well, let's move from that to benefits. So why would you focus on the benefits that are available to you as an employee? The benefits that I've put here: health insurance. And I know we get to health insurance and our country is in a transition here as we move into national health care, to the Affordable Health Care Act. And so you're going to have to dig into that and work through that, and that is beyond the scope of our time for this video. But utilizing health insurance, life insurance, do you realize that the church can provide you up to $50,000 of life insurance and it be tax deductible? It's considered you're not taxed on it. And then disability insurance, and you say, well, we don't really need insurance. And so some of the myths or misconceptions about disability insurance is that your Social Security disability insurance will, if you're in Social Security, and we haven't got to that yet, but it will cover my living expenses and kick in quickly. And the SSDI, the Social Security Department in our federal government, says that it is reserved for people who are severely disabled, usually by a medical condition that lasts at least a year and results in death. And you've got to meet some requirements that are there, and it's pretty stringent. So other people believe, another misconception is that the majority of disabilities are caused by accidents. But the truth is that only about 10% of disabilities are caused by injuries or accidents. 90% of the disabilities are caused by illness. And this numbers are brought to us by the Council for Disability Awareness, CDA. So if you're looking at this, here's a way for you to care for your family. You say, well, Marshall, have you ever used it? My wife has used it in her employment, and we planned for it, and it was a great blessing. So part of that, to ensure your family and your church family, is to steward the benefit of health insurance, life insurance, and disability in a way that will protect everyone involved and keep it from being a fiasco or a disaster. If you have need for this insurance and don't have it, then it's great difficulty. But here is something else that most all of you can apply and use: an HSA, a health savings account, or an FSA, a flexible spending account, to reduce your taxable income. So you can use one of these plans that are provided to you under the federal law to reserve money that is not taxed federally for your federal income tax, and you use the money according to the regulations if you have a medical need. And you use it. For us and our family, we have a credit card that we reserve so much pay, and we go to get a prescription or go to the doctor or have to have some medical procedure done. We have that to meet our deductible, and you don't pay taxes on that money as it comes through. So setting aside that money that you would have spent, federal income tax that you would have paid on money you spent on the medical expenses, is saved by using one of these plans. Then as we go through this, let me just put this in front of you. If you are in self-employment tax, if you have not opted out of Social Security, you're going to have to file that and carry it out. So with this benefit, again, you have federal and self-employment tax to pay, plus any state income tax that may come into play for you. And so you look at this, again, we're back to the same thing. The dollar in this format applies to the benefits. If you steward them correctly and plan well, it's going to put money in your pocket. And so again, if you look at just the example of $5,000 of taxable income at 30%, meaning the self-employment and federal income tax, that's $1,500. If you take and include state income tax, if you have that in your state and if it applies, that's over $2,000. Well, that's over $100 up to $160 a month in extra take-home pay, just because you made certain that if you have these benefits, that they're not taxed federally and with self-employment tax. These are benefits that are a part of the tax law that all of us can take advantage of. So why plan ahead? Well, for a retirement package, if you've opted out of Social Security, And I spent time recently with a pastor, 60 years of age, opted out of Social Security, did not plan ahead, did not take that 15.3% that he would have been paying to the federal government and invested it in a retirement package, gets to 60 years of age, and now he's looking at a window of 7 to 10 to 12 years before he's no longer able to function as a pastor. And what is he going to do to take care of himself and his family? So you have options and preferences about retirement. You may find that you want to set it up where you have the church match your investment to your retirement, or the church provides all of it, and employee provided, or both. And so you need to figure this out. Don't put it off until tomorrow. If you need be, go get a financial planner that is recommended that you can trust and let them help you set this up. There are organizations set up just for pastors and church staff to help them do their retirement planning. Take advantage of those companies and be able to maximize your current dollar as well as the future. I had one pastor say to me just recently, talked about the 403B plan for pastors. And if we understand it correctly, and again, I'm not giving legal advice here or tax advice in this way, but go dig into it. The tax dollars going into the 403B for pastors is not taxable, nor when it comes out. And so if that is true and holds true, then you're really saving money by investing your money wisely, both now for your tax package and down the road when you retire. So what about business expense? And so as we get into this, have you set up a reimbursable plan for your church staff? So you have a record-keeping system, and it may provide discretionary funds for you, but so that you're given accountability. And as a general rule, your staff will either be accountable to the church family or to the government. And so as you go through these things, how are you going to handle this accountability? Either given accountability to the government through your tax return, or to your church family as you turn in receipts and give account as to how you spent money, whether it was through a credit card that is provided to you or a cash advance each month or week, however you're setting that up, or you're reimbursed when receipts are submitted to the church, that you want to make certain that you handle that. Now, let me give you one heads up for a method to even save you a little more tax money. Let's say that you have an accountability plan, a reimbursable plan set up for your church. But toward the end of the year, you're watching this and you realize that you did not have some line items that you needed in your budget, and you spent some money that it wasn't covered by what was set up, and somehow or another you spent money that wasn't reimbursed by the church. If you find that, let me encourage you, if you have unreimbursed business expenses at the end of the year, consider turning those receipts into the church and ask them to reduce your taxable income, your salary, whether you're doing W-2 or 1099, by that amount. It will keep you from putting these expenses in your federal and state income tax return. And the one pastor and I were talking about this as he was advised, and it said it just removes it out of consideration by the federal government. You're not putting it as a part of your tax return. You have just reduced it and not counted them on your tax return. So that is one way to make certain that you're saving money, because you're going to be taxed on that if you're not reporting it correctly. So what is deductible as a business expense? What should be included as a business expense? Well, transportation, whether your car is provided by you personally or by the church, transportation in your travel to conferences, seminars, retreats, continuing education. Your education can be considered a business expense if required by the church, and that is continuing education, whether it's formal or what we're doing right here, where it's informal education, which our ministrydesigntraining.com is informal education that's online training to provide you with what I call gap knowledge, things we weren't taught in seminary. And so tuition and expenses of your education. And so these things can be included. We would suggest you set up a process and policies that cover this and meet the IRS requirements so that it's legitimate and protects everyone. So some important questions that you need to answer. What tools will be included as a business expense? So let's say that you're a pastor of a small church. You're starting perhaps your church and you've got books. Who owns the tools? The books, whether they be printed or electronic, software, whether they're study tools or administrative tools, cell phones, and some more questions. What can be included in it? Let's say you are that pastor who started the church and your office is in your home and you've gone and bought equipment and you've incorporated your church. Who owns the copier and the printer and the scanner and the fax machine and the landlines? Have you bought those out of your own pocket, or have you worked it so that the church is purchasing these things? Computers, whether they're desktops or laptops or iPads or whatever's next in technology, because it's coming at us so quickly, have you made certain that you're not paying for these things out of your own pocket and the church owns them, and you're not paying federal income tax and state income tax and self-employment tax on these things where you've spent this money? So let me deal with something that you may not have really run across, and that's work for hire. So work for hire, who will own the following things? The books that you author, the sermons that you preach, the videos that you record. You say, well, Marshall, what in the world are you talking about? Under the law, as I understand it, and it can be acted on by your congregation, is that you're employed by your church. Are they thinking that you've done this, even though it was at midnight on a Tuesday night, that you're up slaving away, writing this book that you're going to author, and it comes time to receive the royalties, and your church says, well, those royalties belong to us. We own the book, and we own the proceeds from the sale of the book because you did that as an employee. And so just to make you aware that as you go to do that, take the necessary steps to verify, confirm, as you carry out this, who's going to own these things. So how are you going to regulate the work for hire? Are you going to do it by the position in your church, or by the person, or by the profession? And, if you're writing a book about repairing cars, and that doesn't apply to pastoring, you might have an argument that that's, doesn't belong to the church. I would encourage you to look into this and make certain that you have dealt with it, because there are work for hire laws, and you need to make sure you master that. Then let me hit something here in a way, kind of chasing a rabbit trail. But exempt or not exempt status for your church staff. There may be some, your support staff, who work a 40-hour week, and they are non-exempt, meaning if they work 41 hours, they're qualified under the federal law that you have to pay them overtime. Then you have staff who are exempt, like you as a pastor. You may work 110 hours in a week and you're not paid any overtime. And so as you consider this and begin to bring this all together, you've got to regulate the work for hire. So let me give you just one formula for determining individual staff pay packages. So you've got a senior pastor or lead pastor, an executive pastor, or administrative pastor, and you look at any future staff that you're going to bring in, and you begin to process to regulate salaries. So one resource, and it's Effective Christian School Management, was written some years ago by two friends of mine. They set up a baseline in this for Christian schools, but you can apply it to church. And you've got the senior or lead pastor who his base salary is paced at 100%, and the associate pastors have maybe 90% of that or 85% of that, and support staff, and you know where to start. And then you include variables in this, so their education, their years with you, their experience, or any number of other things that you can include in this to determine how to pay them. And everybody knows the process and the rules and how their pay is being done, because this is one of the most uncomfortable things I ever had to deal with as a senior pastor, was the pay package. From turning in the housing allowance and dealing with that to business expense, I would encourage you to consider our ministry compensation, how to navigate your process and negotiate your pay package. It's a video series we've produced for you that you can get a hold of this, and it will pay for itself many times over to help you figure out how you can best set up your process so that year in and year out you make it a pleasure, not something that is unpleasant or that you dread doing. But there are variables in this one simple process to regulate salaries in your church. Now, let me talk about severance packages, and this is a part of your pay package. Onboarding and offboarding is a normal part of the business world, but churches don't seem to think much about hiring and firing, or hiring and retiring, or hiring and a pastor dying while he's holding the office of pastor, or some staff position. And so onboarding is bringing them on, and then offboarding them is taking them off. And are you going to provide a severance package? If so, what are the terms? Will you give a severance package to a pastor who had to resign, or you had to fire him or her because of moral issues, performance issues? How are you going to do this? I read recently when one church just did it by situation by situation. There were no written guidelines there. I would encourage you to put down the guidelines, to make it a part of the employment manual and the operational manual, and agreement with your staff. If they're going to retire, do they get some kind of severance package? If they leave on their own, you've got to decide these things, and you want to be proactive to decide them ahead of time. But your severance package can be a part of your retirement package. And so as you look at this, steward that issue. Now, to give you fair warning, if you're in a church where you don't have C-level employees, meaning CEO, CFO, who are accustomed to dealing with pay packages and severance packages, your people who are in charge of your pastoral relation committee or your budget committee, they may look and go, why would you get a severance package? And so you may have to do some teaching and explaining there as to why you would like to see this set up for your pastoral staff. More questions about pay packages. How long are you going to do it? How much do you include? What's included? Just the salary you pay them, or the housing you pay them, or the benefit package? You're going to carry that on for 3 weeks, or 3 months, or 6 months, or a year? What is that going to look like? All these different questions that you need to answer. Does tenure matter? And how long are you going to make it? Days, weeks, months? So that you've answered these questions ahead of time. And stewarding this aspect of your severance package can keep hard feelings from developing, and someone being tempted to bitterness because you gave it to one guy but not to another, or you hadn't stipulated how it worked. So get that worked out. But this is a part of your pay package. So Pastor, if you haven't thought about this, start talking about developing that, researching that, and considering how to make this happen. So there are some compensation, as we close here with the presentation. There are some compensation resources you can consider. I mentioned Carl Herbster and Jim Dewink's formula for setting staff compensation in the Effective Christian School Management, the book they wrote some years ago. Here's the link to it, that you can go purchase it. It's, I don't know, $10, $12 now to buy it. Another one is the compensation handbook for church staff, and there are others along with this. Leadership Network puts out one for pastors of large churches, their survey, and then the National Association of Church Business Administrators, they have their ministrypay.com that you can go to, and that's another one. I just didn't put them up on the screen for you, that you can go and see their survey and be able to get help there. But this one that's on the screen is $35. It is done every year. They survey thousands of staff members and thousands of churches. I've used it as a senior pastor to help set up the one in our church, and it can help you know what other pastors are paid. It can help you know what the variables are, and it walks you through setting up that baseline. And so by baseline is where you start. So whether you're going to follow Carl and Jim Dewick's book and their formula, or you're going to go and use the compensation handbook or ministrypay.com with NACBA's or Leadership Network's one, that you have some resources here to follow. For you personally, as you do your taxes, you can go to guidestone.org, which is a free minister's tax guide, and Richard Hammer is involved in this. I've read through the material and look at it. This will help you. And it's a free resource for you to get after it. And so as you consider that, they have help there with the tax laws, housing, disability, insurance. Guidestone.org will help you with your retirement. They specialize in that, if I understand it correctly, and that's a good resource for you. Worth's Income Tax Guide for Ministers. Here is the cost of it. Zondervan's Minister's Tax and Financial Guide. Here is where you get it and the cost of it. So you've got on the screen in front of you numerous guides that you can jot down. Now, having said that, I've really just given you the tip of the iceberg of the information that we have made available to you. And if you'll write down this link that's on the screen in front of you, it will take you to a landing page where you can purchase our video series on ministry compensation. And I go through in 2 videos. They're 55 minutes long, along with a whole bunch of support documents, along with all these resources to help you master how to navigate your process. So we show you how to design and develop it, how to navigate it, and how to negotiate your pay package. And so it will help you figure out and answer the important things that you need to know, how to both navigate your process and negotiate your pay package. Now, Marty, do we have any questions that we need to address at this time?
Okay, Marshall, thanks for that. That's a good point. At this point in the presentation, if you do have any questions, please go to that box below the video screen and type in your questions right now. We're going to be going through a question and answer period. One of the questions that has been asked already is, will this be made available, printouts of your slides or some type of a resource guide? And I know that some of this, I'll let you answer that, Marshall, if you're going to make the content of this available.
We hadn't planned to make it available in writing as though we wrote it out for you. But in our resources that we provide on ministry design training, you have both a note-taking outline provided with these videos so you can capture the points of the PowerPoint presentation. And then, of course, the way we've set it up, when you purchase the product, you have access to it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365, where you can go back and review it, and also allow your leaders to view it so that it'll help walk you through. We'll have to think through, Marty, how to do that as far as putting this into a workbook, if I understood the question correctly, where they could see it written out. And I tell you what I can do. I can put it into writing and put it into a Word document or a PDF and email it to them if they like. So if they want to email us and request it, we'll send them the PowerPoint presentation so that they can have that to review again and again.
Okay, Marshall, I'm pulling up some more of the questions here. Let me just bear with me here. Let's see if we have any more that were added on. Yeah, we have. Any tips on determining raises for each budget year?
Well, one of that is to follow the compensation that I had put here on the screen. Let me get back to that real quick. And that's the compensation handbook. If you set that as the guide that your church agrees to follow, you will find out the cost of living raise and other things that pastors are making in your area. So setting the baseline of where you're going to start or what you're going to base the salary on. That's why in the front end I talked about setting it on the community the demographics of income of the community or your church or the industry professionals in, pastors. And this compensation handbook, it deals with, I don't know, 9 or 10 or 12 different categories, from senior pastor all the way down to children's pastor and staff in every position to help you. So as you go through that, I think setting up your process so it's an annual process you're following as you get to this part of your annual year, that you know what the process is going to look like, and it can remove questions about what are we going to do next. Don't recreate the wheel every year. Set up your operational manual for setting the pay packages for everyone in your church who is paid.
Okay, we do have another question that has come in, Marshall. Let me see here. Is there a legitimate way for pastors to reduce their taxable income by directing their board to withhold their tithe and offerings rather than writing a check back to the church for their personal giving?
I have seen that done. One of my friends started doing that some years ago. He asked the church to withhold 10% of his pay, and I considered doing that when I was a senior pastor. If the tax law hasn't changed, I believe that you can do that.
Okay.
You're not paying self-employment and federal and state taxes on it then. So it's just one way of handling it.
Right. Okay. We're going to see if any more questions are coming in. I'm checking that as they come in. But I just did want to mention, I've heard Marshall say many times when he's talking about information that he gives. When he does these webinars, he talks about information coming at you like it's like drinking from a fire hose. And I know just going through this, it is amazing the amount of information you've covered in just a short period of time. That is why I do want to mention again the link that you see on the screen, ministrydesigntraining.com/paycheck. If you go to that link, if you're interested in having this in a format that you can review over and over again, plus all of your other materials, your resources in PDF format and other formats that you always provide with your training, you're going to have also additional training that was not mentioned here that's going to be very helpful for you in your compensation planning. I got to tell you, there is a cost involved because there is a cost involved for ministry design training and that being up and involved. But when you look at the cost that's paid for the training, for this training, and how much that could save you as you went through your, I was laughing to myself as you were going through your examples about things that are tax deductible, like, for example, this training at ministrydesigntraining.com/paycheck. That would be a tax-deductible training expense. And these are the kind of things that you can learn there. It's really going to pay for itself many, many times over. And that's just the tip of the iceberg that was mentioned here in the webinar that would be available for you in that training. I want to encourage you folks, if you found this interesting, to check that out, check out that link. Let me check here, and I'm going to check for any more questions here. If you do have any additional questions, please put them in. And I would like to mention, if you found this webinar to be valuable, please mention what you thought in the question box. Just tell us what you think as far as the value you received today, and also let us know if you think this would be great to have as an ongoing thing from Ministry Design Training and Marshall. If you'd like to see other webinars on different topics, Marshall has covered quite a wide range of things, in all part of that gap knowledge that he mentioned, the things that you are not learning in seminary. So please go ahead and put your comments in there, and if you're interested in attending more webinars in the future, we'd be delighted to put those together for you. And let's see if we have, okay, here is, okay. So I don't see any additional questions that have come in, but we are getting closer to our hour, and we do want to be mindful of your time. So take this opportunity again to put in some more questions or comments, your thoughts about the webinar. And Marshall, any other thoughts that you want to give about the content that you covered today, and also what's available on the training that people can purchase?
In the training that we provide, by the way, much of what I have shared with you in that fire hydrant time is on our laser lesson. There's some other information in the laser lesson that wasn't a part, but that's just a $7 investment if you wanted to go to our website, ministrydesigntraining.com, to purchase that. But in this ministry compensation, in this video, we have set it up in 2 videos. One of them deals with navigating and negotiating your pay package. The second one deals with all the components in depth, about an hour's worth of teaching, along with one document after another to help you navigate your way through this, so that you can figure out how to set up a way every year that you use it, so everyone knows what's happening. And just using what we teach you there, it may actually end up, depending on your situation, saving you 5 to 10% of your pay, which we'd mentioned. If you have a $50,000 pay package, use it correctly, it's $2,500 to $5,000 of extra money in your pocket because you didn't pay it out in federal or taxes or self-employment taxes. That's about it, Marty.
Okay. We do have another question, if you have time for that. The question is, do you have any comments about love offerings as a way of funding a pastor's salary? I visited churches where the envelopes have 2 check boxes, one for general expenses and one for pastor. Is this common? Is this legit?
I've only seen it done one time. It was a friend of mine that I've known now for over 3 decades. One church that he pastored, they took a love offering for him once a month. And that love offering on a particular Sunday every month went to him. And that's the only time that I have had personal contact with that being done. And you could do that. Personally, for me, that makes me nervous in a number of ways. And so I haven't seen it done. As to it being legit, I think it is, but I can't speak with authority about that.
Okay. I'm checking here, refreshing the screen in just a moment, see if we have any other questions that have come up. All right. Right now we don't have any more questions, so we can spend this time and wrap this up. But I hope that if you have found this to be useful, the time that you spent here today, please put a comment in the box to let us know what you think, whether we should continue to do this and offer these webinars. So that's all I have here. That's all the questions we have. Marshall, anything else you'd like to add before we close?
Well, I was just reading through the list of things that we cover in the ministry compensation series. One of them is how to design a compensation package that best fits each staff member. The feedback that I get from pastors when it comes to their pay package is the committee or the group that is handling the pay package doesn't talk to the pastor about the pay package until they've already put it together, then bring him in the room and say, well, here's your pay package. Any thoughts? And so I'm trying to train churches that bring the pastors in on the front end so that they're included in designing their individual pay package so that it best helps them steward their pay package for their family. Don't wait and put it together like one size fits all. And so that's kind of the feedback we'll get in our ministry compensation series that the link on your screen takes you to. We deal with how to set that up and to train your leaders. So we help train your leaders in that video series. We help train your leaders so they treat you fairly, so they appreciate what you're going through, so they're sensitive to the issue of the pay package, and we help you design and develop your process. There's all kinds of other things that we deal with in that, but that was one that I wanted to point out, Marty.
All right. We don't have any more questions right now, but I want to say thank you to everybody that attended. We really appreciate your time, and hopefully we found this to be a valuable way to spend an afternoon.
If you have questions, you've got on the screen here my email address that you can just email me right away and ask any further questions you might have, or simply give me a call, and we'll be happy to talk with you. I hope this has been helpful. Marty, thank you so much for coming alongside me and helping me with all of this. Thank you for listening.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.